Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore how technology is transforming our lives, work, and even world. And in the current climate, we're all on the same journey, no matter where you're listening to this podcast in over 165 countries, I believe we're at now. Because it seems that most businesses have finally agreed that the old way of doing things is just not going to cut it anymore. But where do you begin to build an innovation strategy or embed a culture of innovation within your organisation? And how can technology help businesses' recovery in a post-COVID world, and especially around cash collection, revenue, and customer relationships? And if we go beyond that, what role can predictive analytics, AI, and data for business finance operations? And how can tech solve the problems with late payments between businesses? All these are a long list of familiar problems that I suspect will resonate with every business leader, startup founder that could be listening to this podcast. But I recently encountered a company called Sidetrade, and they're using artificial intelligence to empower marketing, sales, and finance teams to grow their sales and accelerate cash. And Sidetrade also identifies untapped business opportunities on the customer journey with Aimie, its artificial intelligence platform. So we have a lot to get through today as we tackle all of that and more with Mark Sheldon, CTO of Sidetrade. So enough rambling from me. Let's get Mark onto the podcast right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
So first of all, Neil, many thanks for having me on. It's a great pleasure to join you today. So I'm Mark Sheldon. I'm the group CTO of a company called Sidetrade. So I joined Sidetrade probably 4 years ago now, actually through an acquisition. So prior to this, I was the founder of a machine learning startup called BrightTarget. I've spent probably the last 7 or so years helping organizations to implement AI, particularly in the kind of large B2B space, as well as running quite large engineering teams.
There's so many reasons I'm excited to get you on today, because in the current climate, it seems that every business is realizing now that they cannot keep going on with the old way of doing things and looking at innovation and different strategies. So I've got to ask though, what are the challenges around innovation and the customer? And how do you stay focused on the customer as a co-innovator when it comes to product R&D, for example?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think probably the biggest challenge is that, to be honest, I think the customer often doesn't always know what they want. Yeah. I think if you take the kind of classic Henry Ford type example, if he'd have asked people what they wanted, they'd have just said, we need faster horses, and he'd never have made the car. So I think for real true innovation, you need this mix of the vision to change the world, as well as a real deep knowledge of kind of customer needs and the pain that you're trying to solve. So I think it's a real mix between the two. I think practically speaking, if I look at what we do at Sidetrade as an example, we try and focus all of our whole engineering organization actually into streams that are very, very focused on specific customer objectives, so that we can try and ensure that everything we do is very customer focused.
And on the topic of innovation, it's often said that a recession can act as a huge catalyst for innovation, especially as businesses attempt to do more with less. So where do you begin to create an innovation strategy and build that culture of innovation? Because I think it's something that so many businesses are trying to do right now, and some are doing it the right way, some are doing it the wrong way. But from your experience, where do you begin on something like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I agree. I think there's probably 2 parts to this personally. I think, firstly, many businesses will really have to pivot in this kind of situation just to survive. So I think if you look at companies like BrewDog in the UK, they've had to close all of their bars. But in kind of reaction to that, they've converted all of their distilleries to make hand sanitizer. They've started running online bars, and they're now doing home delivery. So this is an example of a company in a difficult situation that is pivoting to survive. But I think also, secondly, in a kind of recession or during a big world event, I think this promotes huge opportunity for many kind of entrepreneurs. If you take like companies like Groupon that started back in 2008 after the big financial crisis. I think that, they took advantage of the situation at the time and offered like cash-strapped users chance to get more value for their money using deals and coupons. And if you look at where that company went from 2008 on to 2011 when it IPO'd for a huge, I think it was the second biggest tech IPO of all time. It's a great example of how innovation can come in a difficult time. I think to answer your second part of the question, I think in terms of how you begin, I think it really depends on your business. But whether it's a startup or a really large corporation, I think it always starts with the people. And you mentioned the word culture. I think that is key. So really, to promote a culture of innovation, I think you need to remove the fear of failing. You need to give people freedom and you need to really trust them. And I look around so many organizations and so many teams, and I'm not saying I've got this fully right in my team yet, but this is something we're working on. I think it's definitely missing. You're never going to drive this true culture of innovation if people are just following orders.
Absolutely. And I think if you were to Google what innovation is or how to innovate and go on Google News, you'll find hundreds of articles saying 10 best ways to perform an innovation strategy and stuff. And then you've got other businesses that we all know and love that will get football foos tables, multicolored bean bags and round up the creatives and say, right, go away and innovate. But it's not as simple as that. And one of the things that I try and do on this Daily Tech podcast is maybe bust a few myths. So on the subject of innovation, are there any myths that frustrate you that you'd just like to lay to rest today once and for all?
Yeah, I do hear lots of leaders saying that you can't force innovation. And actually, I've kind of a mixed opinion on that. I think it's really true that you can't just, tell others to start innovating and expect lots of good to come from it. That's just not how it works. But I really believe you can build an environment that encourages it and rewards curiosity, that challenges people to keep asking why and be okay to fail, as I've already mentioned. And I think if you can do that, then you can almost force innovation by creating that environment.
And I think this is a great opportunity to introduce listeners to Sidetrade too, because it's my understanding that Sidetrade provides AI technologies to drive value for your customer relationships, grow revenue and generate cash flow. But do you have any use cases or real world scenarios just to help people listening that are hearing about you guys for the first time, how that could work in their world and the kind of problems that you're solving?
Yeah, sure. So our main software product effectively helps businesses to collect cash from their customers. So we're like a CRM tool for cash collection teams, if you like, and we help them to really try and optimize their daily life. Because we've always been a cloud software platform, we've benefited from years and years of data and interactions on our platform. And what we do with that is then to use AI or artificial intelligence, machine learning to make predictions then on what's the most optimum way to collect an outstanding amount. So if I try and make that a little more real, so if we've got in our platform, we can tell a cash collector that's looking at an outstanding invoice, and we can advise them that if they email this particular account on a Wednesday before the end of the month, then there's a 95% chance that invoice will get paid within 5 days. So instead of emailing, spending time on 10 different actions, they can perform one action with a 95% chance of an effective collection activity. So it's an example of how we firstly drive value to our customers, but also to use AI and tech to really drive a differentiator.
You must have so many challenges. All businesses all around the world have got so many challenges with trying to bring that revenue in at the moment, with so many spinning different plates and just trying to survive. And I think most businesses as a result are now moving towards data-driven decision making. So I'm quite intrigued by what you do here. Is there anything you can share around the impact of predictive analytics, AI and data for business finance operations too?
Yeah, I think in the example I just talked about, where we're using AI to optimize or to augment or help humans in an activity, it's a really good example of the benefits of data-driven decision-making in reality. I don't think there's actually There's lots of buzz around AI, but there's not actually that many use cases in the real world where you see a real impact that is actually measurable. So one of the great things that I'm really proud of is the fact that we can actually see this impact. So when we talk about these cash collectors getting AI-driven advice, we can measure their performance, and we can actually see that often their performance in terms of how they collect cash on behalf of their businesses they work for can increase by up to 50% by using AI. So it's a huge game changer for businesses in cash flow, DSO management, and all of that kind of stuff, and especially in the kind of time and environment that we're talking about with a potential recession on the cards, etc.
And I'm curious, I would imagine every business now is being bombarded with new businesses coming along and pitching how they can solve problems using artificial intelligence. But of course, many of them don't actually use AI. Is there any advice you would give to people listening just so they can spot what is AI and what isn't AI, or look beneath the hood?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions. So I think, yes, every software vendor that you see now is an AI provider. Which is definitely not the case. I think the best way to be able to spot them is the fact that without a lot of data, it's impossible to use machine learning and produce, to be a genuine AI vendor. So I think you can generally spot them by, the amount of data that they have available to them. So I think that's generally the way. But for us, we've been around for 20 years. We have trillions of euros of transaction revenue flowing through our platform. So it's almost easy for us to be a genuine AI player because of all that data that we sit on.
And how do you think tech can further help businesses recover in this post-COVID time that we're living in now, especially around cash collection, revenue, and customer relationships? Because these are very real challenges for businesses all over the world, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm obviously a little biased being in the situation I'm in, working for a company in the cash collection space. I would clearly say that most businesses, I think, are going to be very focused on recovery right now, or survival. It's probably survival first before recovery. And I think cash collection is obviously key in this situation. They're going to be looking to, using the right technology in the cash collection space, I think can be the difference between being in a positive or a negative cash position. So it's obviously critical for CFOs at this point, and obviously the whole business in terms of survival. But when we look at recovery, I think the businesses that are going to come out the strongest are those that really drive innovation, as we've been talking about. So I think optimizing efficiency is one part, but I think the real change will be those that apply things like data and AI in finding new revenue opportunities and areas for growth. So I think this is where we'll see the companies with the strongest recovery over the coming years, in my opinion.
And another problem for businesses right now is not only hiring, but keeping tech talent with so much demand for those with the necessary skills, especially around things like AI. But do you have any insights that you can share on that subject too?
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's a tough challenge. I think, to be honest, I think we almost covered it in the questions earlier. I think it all comes down to the culture thing again for me, especially when I look at tech talent. So I think most people in a tech environment, they want to work somewhere where they have this environment to kind of thrive, to learn, to have fun, and to innovate. And I think if you can provide that environment, it becomes much easier to hire, and it becomes much easier to retain. So I think most tech leaders for me are on this journey to try and build this culture, and that is the number one priority.
And of course, we're recording this podcast in October, which means we're probably about 5 weeks away from all the Tech Trends 2021 articles that are going to be coming out from futurists and analysts. Of course, none of them predicted what 2020 was going to be like. They all got that one wrong. So there's no pressure on you here. But if we do dare look into the future and gaze into that virtual crystal ball, what do you think 2021 will look like in the tech sector?
Yeah, wow. This is a tough one. So I think, obviously the tech sector is very broad, so it is quite tough to give a good answer. But I think what I would expect to see, I think we're 21 will showcase the strength of big tech, I think, with more online, more digital, more digitization generally across the industry. I think, you're going to see companies like your Amazons, etc. Surely they're going to get stronger. As the retail high street will struggle, more people shop online, etc. I fully expect that to continue into 21. I think also the SaaS software vendors, those with strong recurring revenue models, I think they're going to come out on top. So companies like Salesforce and obviously Sidetrade, being a little biased. If I look a bit more from a pure techie point of view, I really would expect some kind of big breakthrough in the quantum computing space. I think there's some great research happening in that area, some real great investment that's happened, and companies like Google, etc. I think there could be a real game-changing breakthrough, I think, in this space. And that will have a big knock-on impact on things like AI, computer modeling, and even then everything into health and everywhere else. So I think that is something that I would look out for in 21.
Before you came on the podcast today, I also did a little bit of research. And I came across a research and development hiring campaign that you guys are doing, which covers everything from Birmingham to Paris. So I'd love to hear more about that. Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, definitely. So we've recently opened 2 new tech hubs. So one in central Birmingham and one in Paris. Unfortunately, we're obviously not able to go to either of these offices right now, but I'm really confident we will be back. And yeah, the good news is we are hiring lots of roles actually. So 50 plus roles across Europe and US, across Sidetrade as a whole, and specifically many tech roles. So if you like what you hear today, I would definitely encourage you reach out to us or search for on sidetrade.com in our careers section. And there's lots of information across all of these different jobs across our tech teams and wider.
And we do have a big audience in the US that will be listening today. So anyone that is listening, I will put a link on the blog post that will accompany this podcast to that campaign, just so people can find it nice and easily. Here in 2020, it has been an incredibly turbulent year, to say the least, and we are in a period of uncertainty at the moment. But do you have any interesting or inspiring lessons that you've picked up from tech leaders that you could maybe leave us on a big positive note today?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest lesson I've learned from both successful entrepreneurs and leaders is that I think success is 99% effort, in my opinion. So don't expect it just to happen. You have to earn it and work incredibly hard.
Love that. And before you go, could I just ask that you remind everyone listening of where they can find Sidetrade online, keep up to speed with developments and everything you're working on, and even contact your team if they do have any questions after listening to our conversation.
Yeah, sure. Welcome anyone to search for me on LinkedIn. So you'll find me, just search for Mark Sheldon. Or if you want to email the team, you can email communication@sidetrade.com.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Not just talking about Sidetrade and the great work you're doing and the problems that you're helping businesses solve, but also all that invaluable advice and insights around innovation strategy and building a culture of innovation, something that every business is searching for right now. But more than anything, just thank you for joining me today, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for having me.
A huge thanks to Mark for not only sharing his insights around how to anticipate technological evolutions in AI to stay at the forefront of innovation and hiring and keeping talent. For me, it was also great to hear that they're on a global R&D recruitment drive at the moment. I mean, just a few months ago, a listener from this podcast was telling me how she applied for a role at a company after hearing a podcast interview with the CEO and how much it helped her. And from there, she was sat in an interview room with that CEO. So if you apply for one of these roles, please email me and let me know how you get on, because that's what this show is all about. Highlighting that technology works best when it brings people together. And if you were able to secure a new job after listening to a podcast conversation, how cool would that be? But enough of me rambling. Keep your questions coming over to me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, @NeilCHughes. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Whatever it is, send it over to me. We'll feature you on a future episode too. Other than that, hopefully I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow with another guest where we'll talk about another industry and the impacts that technology is having on it. But until next time... Don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.